Greetings, greetings, greetings. So welcome back to another episode of Dare to Dream with Dr. Nicole. Today, I'm very excited to bring this particular show to you because I normally don't timestamp any conversations that I have. But in the interest of it being Juneteenth, I thought it was necessary to start there. That this is a very special episode of Dare to Dream with Dr. Nicole. And one way to celebrate that is to really kind of give you the origin of Dare to Dream. And I thought that this was important because everything that you hear and see about me is associated with me being the Dare to Dream woman. This vision came over a decade ago when God told me, Nicole, your dreams don't even impress me. So what do you do with that type of information, with that type of intel? And I wanted to ensure that whatever it is that God had given to me, that I would fulfill my purpose in life. But how do you do that being Black in America? Well, today I have none other than Reverend Dr. Angel Thompson here with me so that we can discuss not only where it is that we came from as minorities, the journeys that we have taken, as it relates to economics overall, and how did we land where it is that we are today. And so I want to introduce to some and present to others a very dear, near sister of mine, the none other than Reverend Angel Dr. Thompson. I just butchered your name. It's a new name for me. It's a new name. So let's say congratulations, on that first and foremost. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's so interesting because so many people didn't even know about Juneteenth. So I want to kind of take it back, by first defining it and how it originated. And when we do that, we have to really go to the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is the abolishment of slavery, where it said very specifically that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, and I could talk about that for a moment, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any other place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, Galveston, Texas decided that they needed snail mail, extremely long methodology of snail mail, to let those that were enslaved at that period of time go free. And so it literally took 2 years from the date of January 31st, 1865 to June 19th, in 1865 for the information to have traveled, even though this legislation had been intact. And that's when those that were in Texas, the last individuals in the United States at that period of time, learned that they were free. Now, the reason why I wanted to give that entire backdrop, Doc, is because slavery is economics. Can we just start there?
Absolutely. Come on.
So I want to hear your thoughts overall as to why and the rationale, because you are a psychologist, and so
sociologist.
The rationale, because some people may not understand, well, why would it take Texas so long and things of that nature? But when we boil it down to the lowest common denominator, it makes sense to people like you and me. What are your thoughts about Juneteenth?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on your platform today. It's always an amazing time when I come and roll with the good Reverend Doctor. Look, I'm CU and you're BU, so it's always an amazing experience with two DR periods get together. But for me, I'll be honest, I was one of those people that did not discover what Juneteenth was until I was an adult. When I went to an HBCU, FAMU in the building, Rattlers. And I remember everybody, making a big deal of, about, oh, what are you doing for Juneteenth and XYZ? And of course, because we're out of school in that time, semester normally ends in May, we're packing up in dorms and going home. I noticed that there were, people that really were into Juneteenth. And I was like, well, what is Juneteenth? And they were looking at me like, you don't know what Juneteenth is? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm from New York. We celebrate the 4th of July. You know what I mean? And you have and see, that is one of the blessings that I thank God for going to an HBCU, because it is stoked in Black history.
Mhm.
And, one of the things that students there take, a lot of pride in is the fact that culturally they're immersed and that is their way of living. So to get to your point, I was one of those people. And when I think about the fact that it took until 2021 for them to even make it a federal holiday, and for what reason, I still don't know, but we'll take it. It really goes to show you that was something that was done as an appeasement. It was one of those things that was just thrown into the package with everything else. But back to your point of slavery being economic, I think that if people understood that racism in and of itself, that white supremacy in and of itself is systematic, and it all of the roots of it, as we know from rest her soul, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, that if we really begin to examine it at its core and at its roots, it is economic, and it is a matter of power. It's a matter of wanting to rule, wanting to control, wanting to maintain a certain level of supremacy, not just here in America, but globally.
Right. And I want to give credence to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in that regard. She is the one that really advocated that we have some level of impact and influence in the non-people area activities, because if there was going to really be a distinction about, where the power base lies, and for Black people to advance, they needed to have some level of impact in those areas. And those areas including, I'm not going to get them all right, everybody, but we do have, law, we do have economics, we do have religion, we do have, sex. And so those are a few of the non-government, a few of the areas in which she thought it was critical for us to really be involved in order to change the dynamics of and really break the back of white supremacy. And here we find ourselves that each time from the moment of Juneteenth, when Black people became free, we went through multiple journeys, and much of it was separate but equal. Black people having to work amongst themselves, create commerce and an economy amongst ourselves. And we were doing better, if we would be honest with ourselves, doing better when our dollars circulated within our community. And so another thing that we oftentimes don't hear about is Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and in June as well, May 31st into June, it was destroyed. But when you start looking at what transpires when Black people come together with opportunity to create commerce for themselves, to create, their own economy system, you find that we can thrive overall. But you will oftentimes have outside influences that will detrimentally hinder our ability to grow and to really be affluent. And so for those of you that don't know, one thing about being free is, you got to be able to be free when you have power and the ability to impact not only legislation, but really control over your lives. And so I thought that in adding to this conversation to talk about Black Wall Street, where we understood economy, as our ancestors did, how it was devastated by what you identified as being white supremacy. Talk about a little bit about when you heard, and it might have been FMU too, because I don't think I realized it until I probably knew in high school about Black Wall Street. But what was your journey from, Juneteenth even to Black Wall Street, and how did you come about learning about that?
Okay, so Black Wall Street is something that I actually grew up in my household hearing, because my grandmother, who was born in 1927, actually had a conversation with respect to that, because we had family that suffered devastation as a result of that. For me, that in and of itself sealed it for me from the lens of we need to do for ourselves.
Right.
For us to, I know that it probably sounds horrible to say this in 2023, and I hope nobody nails me to a cross, but I do believe that we as Black people here in America definitely do not take advantage of the economic freedom that we have to be able to spend our money with each other. One of the things that, unfortunately for many others, and you being the financial economic trauma guru that you are, you understand exactly how many times money passes through the hands of other ethnic groups in their communities. And, it's unfortunate that because we have not been afforded the ability to create communities, and every time we did do that, they were recaptured, whether it was legally or whether it was under the guise of protecting, land, whether it was eminent domain, because we did not have the ability to obtain and to maintain land, our ability to do that significantly decreased. But I do believe that because we are in such an economic the economic superhighway with the internet, and we have so many other abilities now to create business online and to create business that necessarily does not need a storefront, that we should really embrace those opportunities, because even though they're trying to do the rebuild of Black Wall Street now, and it has been successful to a degree, we are so behind the 8 ball. And this is just realistically, we're so behind the 8 ball that, no matter how many times, the philanthropists like Oprah and the Black Bill Gates, as they call him, I forgot what his name was. He was the one that forgave everybody's debt at Morehouse.
Yeah.
Even though they are doing their best by way of trying to rebuild through the educational infrastructure, until we are able to build physical communities again, we're going to experience, we're not going to experience the former glory, as I'll call it, that we had back then. It's just I was talking to my father, who is a dry cleaner. And, I said, Dad, were there any Black dry cleaners? He said, oh, you have to understand, where we live at in Hollis, that was the first community where wealthy Black people in New York migrated from when they left Brooklyn and Harlem. And he said, right. Hollis Avenue was nothing but Black owned. It was a white flight when we moved in, and my grandmother and my grandfather purchased their home in 1950. And he said, we owned everything from the pharmacy to the shoe shop, to the meat market, to the produce. We owned it all until things started shifting in our community from drugs, and then it just re-gentrified all over again. So to answer your question, I found out about Black Wall Street very early in life, and I think that we can rebuild it, but I think we're going to rebuild it cyberly and not physically.
That's a very interesting point. So you were talking about originally, the circulation of the dollar within the community. And so at that period of time, within a year, when we look at the 1920s, because we can only work with each other, the dollar could circulate as many times as low as 36 times to 100 times within a year before it left our community. Now, if anyone were ever to ask me, and I thought about doing my dissertation on this conversation, the comparative between the civil rights movement and, Black Lives Matter today, for this one economic point overall. When we fought then, we fought for, desegregation. We did not fight for, the ability to keep our equity, and so we gave ourselves permission to spend our dollars in other cultures and communities. So we did not fight for economic equality, which is what Dr. King died for. So if you really wanted to create a model of Black Wall Street, then you have to understand that the earning power and the ability to trust your community for services and support and resources needed to be there. And other communities still honor that code of working with their own overall. But we fought for desegregation, which gave us permission to go into somebody else's store that didn't look like us and make them wealthier. And we were taking away from our own community. Now, here's the reason why. One of the primary reasons why Black Wall Street was destroyed is because there was poor white individuals on the outskirts of Tulsa, Oklahoma, that were offended by the wealth in the community and felt as if they deserved more or better than what they saw people doing independently. The reason why I wanted to go down this, and yes, this is a Blackity Black show today in the spirit of Juneteenth, I want to point this out because here it is, we're in the 21st century, we're in 2023, and we see this, this stirring up of is this agitation of and Black America taking away the rights of entitlement that white Americans have always had, economically speaking. And so here it is that we have individuals that have always had the power, always had the authority, feeling as if they need to quench what is, or quelch or suppress what they see Black people doing, other cultures and communities doing, people outside of the norm. And they're doing it in the area of economics. They're doing it in the area, as you identified, in education. If you take away information that it took us a while to get, then perhaps we can really suppress your ability to think that you can be innovative or creative and things of that nature. And so how do we break out of that? And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about how cyber technology, really affords us an opportunity to overcome that white fear and Black people excelling economically speaking. But how do you think that we can create a model or a strategy in order to make that happen?
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to totally take control and disrupt on every level the labor system. Once you start dealing with people's ability to earn and you get them to a place where a livable wage is a thing. I don't know if you, I'm sure you remember back during COVID, people literally were more financially stable that were impoverished during that time because of the grants and the stipends that were given through unemployment in the government than any other time than we've seen in modern history.
Let me interrupt for a moment, because the recovery plan that Joe Biden administration put together was the first time that it was ever about the little people. Typically, when America bails individuals out, they bail out small businesses. This was the first plan in America's history where they really focused on the people that were being impacted by COVID. Kudos, because it never happened before. I'm not really sure if we're ever going to see it again in our lifetime. Back to the regularly scheduled program.
And so what that did was it empowered people economically. It gave them a sense of stability. And when you're thinking about Black advancement in America, because we make up 80% of the labor force, okay? Everything from medical to, we're the bus drivers, we're the nurses, we are the people that serve in restaurants, because we basically make up about 80% of the in-person labor force. The thing that I would think that we would need to do first is to begin to revamp and make opportunities available in the labor system. Right now we're dealing with this thing where people are talking about quietly quitting, and we have people now that understand I am worth more than $12 an hour. So if you want me to do this job, then you're going to have to pay me to do it. I think now that we have that that upper hand, so to speak, I think that eventually it's going to shift our ability not just to earn, but to be able to hold on to be able to begin to accumulate. One of the things that I've learned just as a person that had a lot of money at one time and then didn't have a lot of money at one time was it wasn't what I made, it was what I accumulated. It was what I was able to hold on to that really changed and impacted my ability to give. That excess income that I had to be able to give to political candidates and things of that nature that actually do matter and change and give us a better chance at changing the way that we deal things on a community level. For me, that's the first stop. After labor, I would think education. I think that once we empower our people that are younger and younger, you know, one thing I'm noticing is that entrepreneurs in our community are coming along younger and younger. I was reading an article the other day about a 12-year-old millionaire. I was reading, you know, a few years ago, kid retired his mom. Okay. I think that once we get those educational tools in place and we start putting our children on a trajectory that causes them to be able to say, this is what I want to do, and the employment choice that I make and the career path that I choose, it is something that will directly affect what it is that we want to do as well. You know, I hate to say it, but trying to intervene and change some things around when you get to a certain age and you're already entrenched in a certain mindset and a certain way of thinking, feeling, and believing, it can make things a little difficult when you're trying to disrupt something. And so I think that that's why when it comes to people like you and I, we're at that place and at that age where we're lifting as we climb. We practice Sankofa. Okay, we practice that, and because we understand that we're still able to add a measure of stability, but we're still able to do some things, and we have access, and because of our levels of education, we are in spaces and in rooms where we really make difference. The one thing that I can honestly say that we had back then versus what we have now is that, you know, everyone had that same mindset. Everybody was working toward one common goal. I think that because throughout the diaspora, our aspirations as a people are different. Everybody is taking a different road, not necessarily headed to the same goal.
I think you're absolutely right. I want to hone in on what you said about labor first and sort of broaden that out for a moment, which kind of leads to how Dare to Dream, evolved over time. When the Lord said, Nicole, your dreams don't even impress me. Like, what do you do with that kind of intel overall? But one of the things that we together, you and I, have identified is how important it is to encourage individuals to become entrepreneurs. When we look at the model of Black Wall Street, when we look at the ability to be creative and innovative overall and maintain control over that which you create, you see that the economic opportunities are expanded as a result of you having ownership of what it is that you bring to the table. So yes, labor is critical, and we do, have some level of infiltration, oftentimes in the services, which is what you identify, but we're not the owners. And so now we're seeing, that step or that journey into ownership, which if you look at the United States, the laws in the United States, the tax laws are most favorable to those who own. And so when we start recognizing that there are tools and strategies and laws that will allow us, that in spite of color of skin, it allows us the ability to become financially free and set a standard that can not only help our community, but when we own what it is that we are producing, when we own areas in services, then we invest more where we live. And so when you give the backdrop of, where your community came from before we had gentrification, I mean, listen, redlining is legitimate, a legitimate concern. We have improper insurance that have been sold to minorities so that, legacy of wealth has not been transferred on. We have had, individuals that have been taken full advantage of with housing and things of that nature. But now that we are in a position where we have learned from, history, we've learned from, our ability to create and earn. We've learned from the mistakes of Black Wall, and not even the mistakes, the model of Black Wall Street is the model. We've learned from how invaluable desegregation can be sometimes. We are now in a position, we saw this, and I like to give the hip hop community credit for the fact that they are the first level of entrepreneurs that not only tackled, economics, but they also tackled, if we want to talk about it, dismantling racism.
Oh yeah, Killer Mike, T.I., all of them, giving them their props,
Give
letting
them
them
their
say
love.
Ice Cube,
Thank
you know,
you.
Kanye, depending on which day we're talking about.
Which
But
day? Which Kanye we talking about?
exactly. That's my Gemini brother. So, you know, we got to keep him in prayer. But the reality is this: I think that they had such an amazing opportunity to do it because of the way that they influence popular culture.
Yeah.
We influence popular culture more than any other race ever in history, but we benefit from it the least. When you look at Fat Farm and you look at FUBU and you look at Carl Kanai, things that were purchased by larger label houses, they've never gotten to the place where, you know, Versace and Moschino and different things of that nature, yet they're copying us. Case in point, Dapper Dan in Harlem. Dapper Dan in Harlem. They took that brother, listen, sent him out of business. As a matter of fact, Supreme Justice Kagan was the DA at that time and was like, brother, close your shop down. They on their way down here, okay? You know, yeah. And so, I mean, Sotomayor, not Kagan. And so, you know, the reality is we influence popular culture. You see that there's a rebirth now, even in apparel, where they're looking for him, where before they were running him out of business because they didn't want him using their design. People always come to us for what is the next thing, but they're able to capitalize on it because they have access. They have such a head start. And I just have a question for you, as you know, being the CFP that you are. Do you think that we'll ever catch up? Do you think that that gap will ever close for us?
So I think the gap will close, absolutely. And it requires individuals like you and me to have these conversations and to be the trailblazers that we've been called to be. It does require our advocacy to infiltrate the non-people areas of activities, the systems that you oftentimes talk about. It requires us to educate and empower and to guide individuals through, you know, living a model of what it is we're asking people to do, investing into our community, also ensuring that we are financially protected and provided for. One simple way to minimize and close the gap is to ensure that individuals are protecting for the next generation. Something as simple as insurance can give a community a leg up, or a family a leg up, that allows them to set a firm foundation and build from there. Home ownership being the same thing, education being the same thing. And so now that we have all of this information and we're pulling it all together, if people continue to value entrepreneurship, daring to dream, and then using one another to do as we've identified in our lives reflected, lift as we climb, we will be able to close the gap. And that's why I remain optimistic to this day. I remain optimistic that, you know, we've come a long way from 1865. We've come a long way from 1921. We've come a long way from 1968. And here it is that we're facing tumultuous times even now. But, you know, as we have won before, we will win again. And so that allows us to remain optimistic, and allow me to remain optimistic that as long as we continue to do this work, you know, it will yield the results that we intend. And prayerfully in my lifetime, you know, I will see some closing of the wealth gap overall. Doc, I want to give you the final words here. You know, I want to thank you because there's nobody else that I would rather have this conversation with. I also want to make an announcement as soon as you finish, you know, overall. But before you close out, please let people know how they can communicate with you, you know, reach out to you, because you are indeed an entrepreneur, and we want to make sure that they understand that as well.
Well, I'm Dr. OJ. You can find me on all social media platforms as that, DROJAY. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I also am a publisher. I published a really good book. You might have heard of it. It's called The Quiet Shift. But you know what? I think they'll find, yeah, that one. Yeah, it looks familiar. And guess where that's going to be on June 20th? It's going to be at the crossroads of the world at Times Square on none other than the NASDAQ billboard. So I'm excited about that. But I am your girl, Dr. OJ. You can find me at droj.com as well. Thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you today, Doc.
I appreciate it. And listen, we lift as we climb, and it's also important to recognize how critical partnership is, collaboration is. As Dr. OJ has already indicated, she is my publishing partner for The Quiet Shift. The reason why, I'm going to be on Times Square billboards is because I won for not one book, but two books. And the book that I won on as well is Dare to Dream, Pushing Past Your Pain to Pursue Purpose. They will both be featured at New York's Times Square, but we do this work together. We do work together in ministry. We do work together in business. And if we truly want to see Black Wall Street once again, then we must be our brother and sister's keeper. We must continue to encourage individuals to dream, to go beyond the scope of what history might have told you, in regards of limitations, and press forward. That's what our ancestors did, after Juneteenth. That is what they did after Tulsa. That is what they did after 1968. And that's what we're going to continue to do now. As always, it's a pleasure and a privilege that you've allowed me to serve you today. And if you would like to be a guest on Dare to Dream with Dr. Nicole, reach out to us. We love to ensure that your dreams are acknowledged and realized. And any way that we might be able to help you from a financial perspective, yours truly is willing and able to do that. God bless you. Until we meet again, we'll see you soon. Securities and investment advisory services are offered through Next Financial Group Incorporated, a member of FINRA SIPC.